People living in this river valley in the northern panhandle are cradled by the hillsides and have lived in the shadow of smokestacks for decades. Steel mills and power plants line the river that gives this region its name, the Ohio Valley. Those industries and the valley topography also contribute to the region's air quality problems. A USA Today article last year ranked air quality outside schools across the nation using data from the Environmental Protection Agency. According to the article, only 12 other schools in the country have more toxic air than at Follansbee Middle School in Brooke County.
I honestly believe it was not a shock to anybody that lives here in the county. For years, we've dealt with air quality issues. I do believe that the industry in the area have taken this very seriously, and that they have doing everything in their power to help us have cleaner air.
The newspaper article spurred the EPA to monitor the air at more than 60 schools across the country. 4 are in West Virginia, and Follansbee Middle School is on that list.
I do think with our air filtering system and hopefully new windows and doors before long, I think that'll all help with the safety of our students.
Mary Ellen Cassidy wasn't surprised to read the recent articles about air quality around her hometown. She doesn't like her town receiving bad press, but she's glad to see the issue raised.
About 23% of these schools on that list are in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Of the schools on those lists, 7 of those individual schools are within 60 miles of our area. So if you look at the map on the EPA website of the list of schools, you'll notice a little cluster in our area. I think that speaks volumes about the industry and the companies in this area. And are we ready now, once the issue of our children's health is brought up, are we ready now to consider maybe we need to diversify our economy? First solution would be clean up those facilities.
The Northern Panhandle has an economy traditionally based on steel mills and coal-fired power plants. The jobs from these industries have always been held in high regard.
We don't talk about it a lot because there's kind of an understood code of silence. You know, don't complain too much about the industry in the area, because their response may be, if you don't like how we're doing business, we'll pick up and leave. And we're as desperate as any other community right now for jobs. What I'd like to see happen is for the people in this area to believe that they deserve both. They deserve healthy air, water, and soils for them and their children, and good jobs. And to question, is a good job a job that includes risking your child's health?
The EPA will monitor the air outside Follansbee Middle School for 10 random days over the next several months. Then it will determine if more monitoring is needed or if action to reduce the pollution is necessary. But the Northern Panhandle is just one example of air pollution in West Virginia. Other areas that consistently violate clean air standards are Charleston and Kanawha and Putnam counties.
People coming to West Virginia and seeing the extraordinary beauty and nature in our mountains would assume, and often do assume, that our air is very clean. And it isn't. There are actually some cities which have cleaner air than most of West Virginia.
And the state's pollution problems don't just reside in the larger cities or more industrial areas. Even Monongalia County made the EPA's list of regions where pollution levels were too high between 2005 and 2007. There are less people here than in other areas of the state with too much pollution, but Monongalia County is home to several coal-fired power plants. A few more are in nearby counties, and a new plant is under construction north of Morgantown.
One of the first steps that Mon County needs to do is actually start planning for these air quality issues.
Jim Coatson is a WVU plant and soil sciences professor. For more than a decade, he's worked to educate others about the air pollution in Monongalia County.
The main issues here in Monongalia County has been ozone, a component of smog, and what are called the fine particulates. These are aerosols and fine bits of dust that are inhaled into the lungs and cause adverse health effects. And from a health standpoint, the fine particulates are clearly the major health issue that faces the residents of Monongalia County and much of West Virginia.
But a cooler and wetter summer in 2008 actually helped reduce air pollution levels in some areas of the state.
We now have a full year of 2008 data that we're quality checking, quality assuring now, and we will be submitting an update to EPA that basically shows 3 of those 5 areas will fall off of non-attainment. We expect that Huntington and Parkersburg and Monongalia County will become attainment based on the most recent data.
It's important to understand that our air quality in a lot of aspects has improved, but EPA has changed the standards and reduced the standards, thereby, causing us to have to meet new standards.
Even if Monongalia County's most recent air pollution levels remove it from EPA's non-compliant list, Coates says teetering on the edge of these federal limits is unacceptable.
Groups like the American Lung Association and others have argued that those standards should be even more stringent than they have been. And so if we're at 35 now and the standard really needs to go to 30, being at 34 won't help. In any event, having a hard, bright line is necessary for the legal requirements of the Clean Air Act. But from a public health standpoint, pollution is bad, and having almost too much pollution is not really much better than having too much pollution.
Nearby, doctors at West Virginia University are studying why air pollution is bad for our bodies.
On a population sense, we can be fairly sure that bad things are happening. And there's lots of examples of that, well-designed studies that show that increases in all of the different kinds of air pollution result in increases in either respiratory disease or heart disease, depending on which you're looking at. And again, respiratory and heart disease are not the only examples, they're just the best ones.
More specifically, West Virginia University researchers are looking at the health effects of certain types of air pollution. They're studying how ultrafine particles from diesel exhaust affects our health.
Newer generation diesel engines are reported to be cleaner engines, but they're just producing a larger component of ultrafine particles as opposed to the larger coarse or fine particles, which will fall out sooner. So when you see exhaust coming from a diesel engine, you're looking at the coarse and larger particles, the black soot that you can see. The ultrafines you cannot see. The human eye cannot resolve particles at that range. In terms of our health, there's 2 issues at hand. One is the inherent toxicity of particles that we breathe in, and then the other is where the particles can go to.
These tiny particles travel into our lungs and can enter the bloodstream, where they cause white blood cells to react. This leads to the body releasing a chemical that affects the blood vessel's ability to dilate, and this restricts blood flow to various parts of the body.
It's not just the heart that is affected by particle exposure. There's also an increased incidence of stroke on air pollution days. There's also renal disease problems. There is also an increased incidence of hypertension or high blood pressure on days when particle pollution is elevated.
Ultrafine particles are not currently monitored in West Virginia. However, the State Department of Environmental Protection measures ozone and larger particulate matter in several areas. There are 8 ozone monitors in the state. Ground-level ozone forms mostly from volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides. There are 14 fine particulate monitors in the state. Most of this pollution comes from sulfur dioxides and nitrogen oxides. Emissions from vehicles, coal-fired power plants, and other industries are the main sources of ozone and particulate pollution.
Well, there's certainly more that we could do to capture the pollution and keep it out of the air. Now, that too has some mixed message, because very often the thing that we do when we keep the pollution out of the air is we re-inject it into the water. So people need to understand that there are trade-offs. Nonetheless, we've done a very good job over the past 25 or so years cleaning up the air, and much more work needs to be done on some of the pollutants where we really haven't done much to address them yet. Some of the metals, such as mercury and cadmium, we could do a much better job with.
Jim Coatson says officials and the media could also do a better job letting the public know when air pollution is expected to be high on any given day.
We'd like to see more awareness of this because it's one of the few things people can do to protect themselves is be aware of when air quality is bad and how they can best respond to those.
I think taking responsibility for our own behavior is part of the answer. We might want to think about how many coal plants we put all in one place. We might want to think about the national approach to coal pollution. We might want to think about specific things that are not very visible. I mean, you know, the air can look clean and still have some pretty significant problems.